So there are two ideas left in Unit 1. First, using BaseBox to multiply integers. So you might want to look at this video to see how we do this. And you do already have something with rectangle multiplication where there are sliders that might apply. I think you use it for fractions. But here's the idea that we use that I like, and I think we might want to apply dragging BaseBox onto it. So here it's 14 times 23. So in this direction, we'd make it 14. So go to here, 23 in this direction. Okay. And then, so maybe they'd use some sort of slider to go down to 14, a slider to go to 23, and then it would just give them this piece. We definitely want these darker lines for hundreds so they can see that this is a flat and this is a flat. The smaller lines the small squares will help with units. And then for this problem, it goes to 14 down to 23. They would want rods in here. Okay, so the way I see this happening is they have some sort of setup where they set up these numbers. There's a grid like this in the background, and then they can click and drag on BaseBox to set them up. So they drag on 100, put it here, put another 100 here. This would go to 23, so they'd need 3 rods here. Okay, then there'd be 4 rods here because this goes down to 14, 4 rods here, and then they'd have a 3 by 4 here where they'd put 12 units. Okay, so slider set it up, then they drag in the BaseBox. Then we'd ask them, you know, how many of each type of base block there is. Okay, and then they'd need to regroup them. So this one in particular, just give a rough sketch. Okay, so they'd click and drag those. Okay, so they drag a base block here, a base flat here, a flat here. This would be 3 rods. That would be 4 rods. That would be 4 rods, and here's our 12 ones. So then we'd ask them for the flats, which is 200, or we'd want to say maybe 2 flats, and then maybe we'd have them write them as the number, which is 200. The rods, there'd be 4, 4, and 3, so there'd be 11 rods, which we'd have them write as 110. And then the units, there'd be 12, which is 12, and then have them combine all of these to get 322. Okay, so set up the diagram, click and drag on the blocks, write what the blocks are, write their place value, then sum them up to get the result. Okay, so it kind of has this idea here, base blocks, regroup, product. Okay. With dividing, I did one type here, but there's really 2 types I'd like them to see in terms of base blocks. So here, this is use base blocks to determine 564 divided by 4. So in this one, since 4 is small, okay, the easiest way to do it is to break this into 4 groups. So what was it? 564 divided by 4. Here are our 4 bins. Okay, so one way we'll talk about this in the modules is how many copies of 4 are in 564. Well, we certainly don't want to break this into, you know, whatever amount of, don't want to make 4, 4, 4 until we get to 564. So we'll use the other interpretation of division is we're going to break this into 4 groups and determine the size of the groups. So on this type, the I don't know if they're given these base blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or if we have them represent it. I think they should be given it. Okay. And maybe they're in the place value. They may need to decompose them. So let's put, yeah, so maybe start off with 564, okay, in their place value columns, and their goal is to equally distribute this to these groups. Okay, so they would drag this one here, this one here, this one here, this one here. So now they each have 100. Here they'd have to decompose, and once they decompose, and that's 10, which I'm not counting, then they distribute these equally to the groups. I think there's 10 and 6, so there's 16, 4 groups, so there'd be 4 in each one. And then these would actually run out, so they should click and drag them and put them in the bin so they could see what's left over, and then each one would get a single X. Okay, so that's the partitive way of dividing. And then maybe, so what did that equal? 141. And then another way we could do this, 564, if we had a larger number, so divide 564 divided by 141. In this one we can make groups of size 141 and find the number of groups. Okay, so they'd have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. So for group 1, they take 1 flat, 4 of these, and this. So again, it'd be good if they were clicking and dragging them and they were removed from this original spot. So now they've made one group, and there's no remainders yet. So now they need to make another group. They don't have enough rods, so they'd have to decompose one to make the next one. Okay, and they'd keep making these groups until they're out of base blocks. Okay, I'm not quite sure how it would work since they shouldn't know how many groups there are. So the answer is 4 from the previous one we just looked at. So I don't know how you'd set up these bins since we don't want them to know there's 4 of them. We want them to figure that out. Maybe there's a button where they say make new group. Okay, and they drag them, and then maybe it, I don't know, freezes, solidifies. Like once they get a group of 141, it's kind of fixed, and then they could click make next group, and they make another group of 141, and then it's fixed, and then they make next group until they're out of groups. Okay, so that's the gist with multiplication and division. Okay, and I'll end this video here. I think that's it for Unit 1.